There exists a fundamental truth about human existence that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The version of yourself that exists today is a cage. Not a metaphorical cage, but an actual architectural structure of habits, beliefs, tolerances, and compromises that you have unconsciously constructed brick by brick, year after year. This structure was not built with malice or intent. It was built through small decisions, through the moments when you chose comfort over discomfort, when you accepted less than you deserved, when you allowed others to define the boundaries of your potential. The Machiavellian reset is not about becoming a villain or adopting a persona of manipulation and ruthlessness in the conventional sense. Rather, it is about recognizing that the weak version of yourself is your only true enemy, and that destroying it is not cruelty, it is liberation. Once you understand this, once you truly internalize that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, everything changes. The world does not become softer. Competition does not disappear. But you become impenetrable in ways that matter, because you are no longer invested in defending the indefensible architecture of your former limitations. This document represents a systematic approach to that destruction and reconstruction. It is not inspirational in the traditional sense. It does not promise happiness or peace. What it offers instead is clarity, capability, and the kind of power that comes from genuine self-mastery rather than external circumstance. The 10 rules that follow are not suggestions. They are frameworks for action, and they are designed to be implemented immediately, not contemplated indefinitely. The process of destroying your weak self begins not with grandiose action but with ruthless assessment. You must become your own adversary before you can become your own architect. This is where most personal transformation efforts fail. People attempt to build new versions of themselves while still maintaining emotional investment in the old structure. They want to improve without destroying, to evolve without dying. This is impossible. Before you can destroy your weak self, you must know it with the precision of a military strategist studying an opponent. This is not an exercise in self-criticism or self-pity. It is reconnaissance. A weak self is not one that has made mistakes or experienced failures. A weak self is one that has made peace with compromise, that has rationalized limitation, that has traded authenticity for acceptance. The mapping process requires absolute honesty and must be documented. Create a detailed inventory of your weaknesses, but do so with specificity that cuts through vagueness. Do not write "I lack confidence." Instead, identify the precise situations where your confidence collapses and why. Is it when you are challenged by authority figures? When you must speak in front of groups? When your competence is questioned in your area of expertise? Is the problem actual incompetence, or is it the fear of appearing incompetent? These distinctions matter because they determine your strategy. Document your tolerances, the things you have accepted as inevitable rather than recognizing as choices. Do you tolerate disrespect from certain people because you have internalized their assessment of your worth? Do you tolerate a career path that deadens you because changing it feels riskier than suffering? Do you tolerate a body that does not reflect your actual capabilities because you have decided that discipline is too demanding? Each of these tolerances is a choice, and recognizing that fact is the foundation of power. As you map these territories, you will also identify the specific mechanisms by which you self-sabotage. Everyone has them. Some people unconsciously undermine their own success because they subconsciously believe they don't deserve it. Others create drama or crisis because it is familiar and because it justifies their limitations. Some engage in perpetual self-improvement rather than actual change, collecting strategies and ideas without implementing any of them. Understanding your specific mechanism of self-defeat is not pleasant, but it is essential. Rule 2: Sever your emotional attachments to comfort and acceptance. The weak self is comfortable. This is its primary characteristic and its primary appeal. The weak self has negotiated an acceptable arrangement with mediocrity. It has agreed to abandon large portions of its potential in exchange for the security of not being challenged. This arrangement is enforced by emotional attachments to familiar patterns, to the safety of known failures, to the people and environments that have reinforced these patterns. Destroying your weak self requires that you deliberately sever these attachments. This is not the same as developing emotional resilience or practicing mindfulness. It is colder than that. It is a calculated decision to remove the emotional valence that makes mediocrity tolerable. Consider the people in your life who benefit from your weakness. These are not necessarily bad people, but they are invested in maintaining the status quo. A person who respects your limitations benefits when you respect them too. A person whose insecurity is managed by your smaller stature benefits when you do not grow beyond them. A person who has convinced themselves that ambition is hollow benefits when you accept that conclusion. These are not necessarily conscious dynamics, but they exist, and they are maintained by emotional attachment on your part. Begin to notice where you are performing acceptance of others' views about your capabilities, about your appropriate ambitions, about what is realistic for someone like you. Each of these performances is a thread binding you to a limited version of yourself. The severance is painful because it often means disappointing people whose approval you have been seeking. It means walking away from communities that have defined themselves partially through shared limitation. It means being alone during the transition, which is perhaps the most frightening part of all. Rule 3. Establish a doctrine of continuous discomfort. The weak self has engineered its comfort through consistent choices toward ease. Personal transformation is not comfortable, and there is no version of personal transformation that is compatible with the comfort-seeking impulses that created your weak self in the first place. What this rule demands is not suffering for its own sake, but rather the deliberate cultivation of an environment where comfort is not the primary metric of success. This means establishing practices that are inherently uncomfortable and maintaining them without exception until discomfort transforms into discipline. Physical practice is the most obvious entry point into this doctrine. The body is honest in ways the mind is not. If you have constructed a weak self, your body likely reflects that. It has adapted to lower demands, to patterns of inactivity, to the absence of challenge. Changing this requires practices that cannot be negotiated away. This does not necessarily mean extreme fitness. It means establishing a regular practice of physical challenge that you pursue regardless of mood, comfort level, or circumstances. The specific practice matters far less than the unwavering commitment to it. But physical practice is merely the entry point. The doctrine of continuous discomfort must extend into every domain of your life. It means speaking truths that are uncomfortable to speak, rather than maintaining social grace through silence. It means pursuing work that stretches your capabilities rather than settling into competence. It means ending relationships that are comfortable but stagnant. It means saying no to opportunities that offer security but not growth. It means tolerating the uncertainty that comes from being a student again in areas where you had assumed competence. This doctrine is not about being difficult or rebellious. It is about recognizing that comfort is a symptom of stagnation, and that the weak self was built through the accumulation of comfortable choices. Reversing that trajectory requires the opposite pattern, and that pattern must be established as a non-negotiable practice before your weak self has the opportunity to negotiate you back into comfort. Rule 4. Demand immediate evidence of transformation. The weak self is patient with itself. It engages in endless deliberation, endless planning, endless discussion of what it will do. One of the primary mechanisms through which weakness perpetuates itself is through the substitution of intention for action. This rule demands that you establish immediate, visible evidence of transformation. Not in some distant future, but within hours or days of committing to your reset. This serves multiple functions. First, it provides proof that transformation is possible, which is essential psychologically because the weak self has convinced you that you are fundamentally unchangeable. Second, it establishes a pattern of following through on commitments to yourself, which is the foundation of self-respect. Third, it breaks the pattern of endless deliberation and creates momentum. The evidence should be specific and visible. If you have made a commitment to physical practice, the evidence is that you have completed the practice, not that you intended to or feel motivated to. If you have committed to a specific productive endeavor, the evidence is work completed, not time spent thinking about work. If you have committed to severing a comfort zone, the evidence is action taken, the conversation had, the boundary set, the opportunity declined. Document this evidence. Not obsessively, but systematically. Each day, identify one or two pieces of evidence that you are no longer the weak version of yourself. Some days this will be significant. Most days it will be small. The accumulation matters more than the individual instances. What you are building is a track record of actually doing what you say you will do, of following through on commitments to yourself, of being a person whose word to themselves is trustworthy. This contradicts the common advice about being patient with yourself and celebrating small victories. It also contradicts the advice about changing your identity slowly and making sustainable changes. The weak self loves this advice because it allows for indefinite delay. What the Machiavellian reset demands is instead a radical commitment to immediate evidence of change, because comfort and delay are the weapons by which your weak self maintains control. Part 2. The Architecture of Power. Once you have begun the process of destroying your weak self, you must simultaneously begin constructing the architecture that will replace it. This is not comfortable work, but it is systematically purposeful work, and that matters because it means you are building something resilient, not something fragile that must be constantly motivated and supported. Rule 5. Operate from controlled ruthlessness rather than compassion or justification. There is a particular form of mental paralysis that affects many people who attempt transformation. They become aware of their limitations and immediately begin generating explanations for why those limitations exist. Perhaps they had difficult childhoods. Perhaps they have been told certain things about their capabilities and internalized them. Perhaps the system is structured in ways that discourage their success. Perhaps they simply lack the genetics or circumstances that would make transformation realistic. All of this may be true, and, simultaneously, it is irrelevant. This is what controlled ruthlessness means: the recognition that understanding why you are limited does not change the fact that you are limited, and that spending emotional energy on justifying your limitations only further entrenches them. This rule does not mean being cruel to yourself or others. It means making decisions based on what is effective rather than on what is comfortable or sympathetic. It means recognizing that transformation requires choices that will disappoint people, that will appear selfish, that will contradict messages you have internalized about who you are supposed to be. The person who asks permission to transform never transforms. The person who waits for circumstances to become favorable before pursuing their potential never experiences favorable circumstances. The person who attempts transformation while maintaining emotional loyalty to the forces that constrain them cannot gain real freedom. Controlled ruthlessness means that you are willing to make difficult choices without excessive deliberation or self-doubt. You are willing to end situations, relationships, or practices that are incompatible with your transformation. You make these decisions clearly and execute them decisively. This is not the same as impulsive action. It is action taken from clarity about what your transformation requires. If maintaining a particular relationship prevents you from developing the capabilities you need, that relationship must change. This is not presented as an exciting opportunity for growth in the relationship or as a chance to help the other person also grow. It is simply recognized as incompatible with your path. Similarly, if certain social groups or communities are predicated on shared limitation, you must exit those communities. If a career path offers security but not challenge, and you require challenge in order to transform, that career path must change. Rule 6. Build competence in domains that matter, not in domains that comfort. The weak self often pursues development in areas where it is already somewhat capable, or in areas that feel comfortable and familiar. This creates an illusion of growth without actual transformation. True transformation requires that you systematically develop competence in areas where you are currently weak. This rule demands that you identify domains where weakness currently prevents you from operating at your full potential. These are rarely comfortable to acknowledge, because each one represents a limitation you have been tolerating. Perhaps you lack the ability to communicate your ideas persuasively. Perhaps you lack the knowledge required to make informed decisions in your field. Perhaps you lack the physical capability that is limiting your options. Perhaps you lack the ability to navigate complex social or political dynamics. Perhaps you lack the emotional regulation that would allow you to think clearly under pressure. Once you have identified these domains, you commit to building competence in them with the same rigor that would be applied to any critical skill. This is not a hobby or a side pursuit. This is central work. You seek mentorship, you study, you practice, and you apply what you learn in contexts that matter. The timeline is measured in months and years, not weeks, and the commitment is unwavering. The key to this rule is specificity. It is not enough to decide to be better at communication or be more knowledgeable. You must identify the specific context in which this competence matters, communicating persuasively to a particular audience about particular topics, or developing expertise in a specific domain that is relevant to your ambitions. You practice in actual contexts where failure has real consequences, not in practice environments where failure is consequence-free. Rule 7. Cultivate strategic relationships with people who are further along than you. The weak self is often trapped in relationships with people who are at the same level of mediocrity, and these relationships are reinforced by shared understanding of limitations. This is just how people like us are, becomes the repeated refrain. The transformation of the weak self requires that you systematically build relationships with people who have achieved what you are attempting to achieve, who are operating at a level beyond where you currently are. This is not about using people or transactional relationships. It is about recognizing that proximity to capability is one of the most powerful accelerants of growth. People who are further along than you have already solved many of the problems you will encounter. They have already failed in ways that matter and learned from those failures. They already operate with assumptions and frameworks that are larger than the ones you currently hold. Creating these relationships requires vulnerability on your part, the willingness to be a learner, to ask questions that expose your ignorance, to be corrected and guided. It also requires that you have something to offer beyond the relationship itself. No one sustains a relationship with someone who only takes. As you are building competence through Rule 6, you are simultaneously building the capacity to contribute something of value. The specific mechanism matters less than the commitment. This might be formal mentorship, though formal mentorship is often difficult to establish. It might be through pursuing work or involvement in communities where people further along than you are naturally present. It might be through creating collaborative projects. It might be through a structured commitment to learn from someone specific. The point is to deliberately engineer proximity to capability and to use that proximity as a tool for accelerating your own development. Rule 8. Design your environment to support your transformation, not your comfort. The weak self was constructed and is maintained by environments that encourage it. These environments might be physical spaces, the comfort of your home, the absence of challenge at your workplace. They might be temporal, regular patterns and routines that require no thought. They might be social people and communities that reinforce familiar patterns. They might be informational, the media you consume, the ideas you are exposed to, the conversations you engage in. Transforming your weak self requires that you deliberately redesign these environments. This is not about running away from your current life, though it may involve geographic change. It is about recognizing that you are shaped by your environment and that if you want a different version of yourself, you must create an environment that shapes you in that direction. Begin with your physical environment. Make changes that remove comfort from the equation. This might mean restructuring your workspace to encourage focus and challenge rather than relaxation. It might mean changing where you live if your current location enables complacency. It might mean adjusting temperature, lighting, noise levels, and aesthetic qualities in ways that activate you rather than pacify you. Extend this to your temporal environment. The weak self relies on routines that are comfortable and familiar. Replace these with routines that support your transformation. If you have committed to physical practice, build your environment so that practicing is the default behavior rather than the exception. If you have committed to developing competence in a specific domain, structure your day so that focused work in that domain is non-negotiable. Redesign your social environment. This is the most difficult because it often involves distance from people you care about. But the principle is clear: surround yourself with people who are pursuing something, not people who are content with being comfortable. Reduce exposure to people and conversations that reinforce your limitations. Increase exposure to people and conversations that challenge you. Some relationships will naturally fall away as you change. Some will need to be deliberately ended. This is painful, and the pain is often the greatest resistance to transformation. Accepting that pain is central to Rule 5. Finally, redesign your informational environment. Examine what you consume, what you read, watch, listen to. Remove content that soothes the weak self through validation of its limitations. Introduce content that challenges your assumptions, that exposes you to ways of thinking and being that you have not previously considered. This is not about being inspired by others' success stories, though that has some value. It is about systematically exposing yourself to frameworks and ideas that expand what you believe is possible. Part 3: The consolidation of power. As you progress through the process of destroying your weak self and building its replacement, you will encounter a critical juncture. The transition becomes increasingly difficult because the weak self, now aware that it is being dismantled, will mount its strongest resistance. This is when most people revert to their old patterns. This is when transformation fails. The final rules address how to move through this resistance and consolidate the power you are building. Rule 9: Recognize and reject the narrative of balance and moderation. At some point during your transformation, you will be counseled toward balance. Perhaps by well-meaning people in your life. Perhaps by your own mind, using the voice of reason. The message will be that you are being too extreme, that balance is necessary for sustainability, that moderation is a virtue. This narrative is poison for someone in the process of transformation. Not forever, but certainly now. The weak self thrives on balance. It is the balance between ambition and comfort that allows it to persist. It is the moderation in effort that keeps it from changing. A person who is genuinely transforming cannot afford balance until the transformation is substantially complete. This does not mean burnout or self-destruction. It means a temporary imbalance toward your transformation while other areas of life are deliberately allowed to decline in priority. Your health matters more right now than your social calendar. Your development in critical domains matters more than your comfort at your current job. Your commitment to the new version of yourself matters more than the approval of people invested in the old version. The people who counsel balance are often comfortable, and they often have something to lose if you change. Their counsel should be received as data about what they fear, not as wisdom about what you need. Similarly, your own mind's desire for balance should be recognized as the weak self attempting to renegotiate the terms of its dissolution. There is a time for balance. That time is not now. You will know when you have accomplished sufficient transformation because balance will become compatible with continued growth. Until then, recognize the narrative of balance for what it is, a trap designed to prevent you from becoming too different, too capable, too free. Rule 10: Accept that the new version of you will be alienating to your former self and others. As you progress through your transformation, you will begin to notice something disquieting. The things that used to appeal to you begin to feel hollow. The people you used to spend time with begin to seem petty or limited. The concerns that used to occupy your thoughts begin to seem irrelevant. The weak version of yourself, which you are deliberately destroying, becomes increasingly foreign to you. This is not enlightenment. It is simply the reality of genuine change. This will be disturbing to people around you who have benefited from your weakness or who are comfortable with the version of you that you are destroying. They will interpret your transformation as betrayal, superiority, or coldness. They may attempt to pull you back to the familiar by suggesting that you have become arrogant, that you are losing yourself, that you are becoming someone they don't recognize. Some of these interpretations are accurate, in a sense. You are becoming someone they don't recognize, because you are no longer the weak version of yourself that they knew. This final rule requires that you accept this alienation without attempting to justify yourself or prove that you are still fundamentally the same person. You are not. The project of the Machiavellian reset is precisely to become someone fundamentally different from who you were. Some relationships will not survive this. Some communities will reject you. Some doors will close. This is the cost of transformation, and it is a cost that must be consciously accepted. There is a particular trap that prevents many people from fully implementing this rule. They attempt to transform while maintaining approval from their previous communities and relationships. They become less weak but are still constrained by emotional loyalty to the version of themselves that those communities knew. This is half transformation, and it provides the worst of both worlds. You lose the comfort of your previous life without fully gaining the freedom of your new one. Accepting the alienation means recognizing that becoming powerful, capable, and autonomous is not compatible with being universally approved of. It means understanding that people who knew the weak version of you will often resist the strong version, and that this resistance says something about them, not about you. It means being willing to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be alone if that is what your transformation requires. The man who destroys his weak self cannot be destroyed by others because he has already done the most destructive thing that anyone could do to him. He has destroyed the version of himself that was vulnerable, that was seeking approval, that was constrained by the opinions of those around him. What remains is someone who is difficult to attack because he has nothing to lose except what he was already willing to destroy. The integration of power after the implementation of these 10 rules, something fundamental shifts. The weak self is not entirely gone. It will whisper and tempt you toward comfort indefinitely, but it no longer has structural power over you. You have deliberately dismantled its architecture and replaced it with something else. What that something else is will be different for each person, because transformation is not directed toward a universal ideal. It is directed toward a version of yourself that is not constrained by tolerance of discomfort, by emotional attachment to limitation, by the need for approval from sources that benefit from your weakness. You have built competence in domains that matter. You have surrounded yourself with people who challenge you rather than comfort you. You have designed an environment that shapes you toward your aims. You have rejected narratives that would constrain you. The weak version of yourself is the only enemy that truly had power over you. Family members, competitors, difficult circumstances, these are not your enemies, though they may oppose you. Your opponent is the internal architecture of your own limitation, and you have declared war on it and won. What comes after is not happiness in the conventional sense. It is capability, clarity, and the deep satisfaction that comes from operating at a level that approaches your actual potential. The Machiavellian reset is not a path to villainy. It is a path to authenticity, to power used for its own sake rather than for the sake of others' approval, to the kind of freedom that comes from being willing to be different, to be alone, to be misunderstood if that is what your development requires. The man who has destroyed his weak self cannot be destroyed by others because he has already survived the destruction of the only thing that could truly destroy him. What remains is someone who is difficult to stop, difficult to manipulate, difficult to constrain. Not because he has become cruel or ruthless in the conventional sense, but because he has become real. This is what the Machiavellian reset offers, the opportunity to become real in a world of simulated weakness, to become powerful in a way that no external circumstance can take from you, to become yourself rather than the version of yourself that has been negotiated by others' needs and expectations. The time to begin is now. Not tomorrow when you feel more motivated. Not next month when circumstances improve. Not when you have fully planned out your strategy. Now. Do something today that your weak self would negotiate away. Make a choice that prioritizes your transformation over your comfort. Sever an attachment that binds you to limitation. Speak a truth that is uncomfortable to speak. Pursue something that stretches you beyond your current capability. The weak version of yourself is already resisting. The longer you delay, the more entrenched it becomes, the more it negotiates you back into tolerance. The only antidote is immediate action. The only escape is the willingness to destroy the familiar architecture of your limitations and build something new in its place. The man who destroys his weak self cannot be destroyed by others. Become that man. Begin now.